course, is now quite aggressive, quote, to enhance China's, quote, soft power. Actually, I dislike the term soft power a lot, even though Joe Nye is a good colleague and also very intelligent in developing this concept. Because it's, again, very instrumental. What is soft power? Soft power is not enough to control with the military mind or economic strength, but also with your culture. If, say, Hollywood and all these are part of the soft power of the West, why should we be so proud of it? And China, for example, is developing all these Confucius institutes all over the world. Now I think there must be 1 or 2 in Malaysia. And they're going to build as many as 500. There's a lot of suspicion about what is the intention. And if you look at it charitably, you say, look, this is like the Goethe Institute or the Cervantes Institute. In other words, to teach people how to learn German or learn Spanish, now learn Chinese. But on the other hand, it can also become a propaganda machine. So I think China is at a very critical juncture how to shape her own self-image. Not simply worry too much about how the public image is to be protected. Give you one example. This is a very tragic example that I think I should share with you. The Olympics turned out to be very successful. The opening of the Olympics, people were overawed by the technology, electronic power, and also glorifying Chinese culture. The word "he," harmony, is stated in so many different languages. In the beauty of the Chinese character and so forth. That's great. But shortly after that, you have this poisonous milk, milk powder, and children, baby, suffer. And these people were not punished. And the officials, some officials covered it up. Just one incident of that nature, your reputation ruined as a great power. As a power with great influence. So I think it's important for China to be totally transparent and open. We have all kinds of negative features. We also have some positive. Because I don't think China will ever be condemned as severely as China was condemned by some of the most brilliant Chinese intellectuals in the May 4th generation, right? Use your worst of the worst to compare with the best of the best. China has never, So China now should have enough confidence to try to present China as China is to the outside world. I think gradually, some kind of adjustment will have to be made. But truthfully, the rise of any power is going to upset the order, and some kind of adjustment is able. And in this case, it's too consequential to become confrontation. To say it has to be dialogical is not a wishful thinking, it's a necessity. If there's no dialogical interaction between, say, the United States and China, or Europe and China, or Asia in general, we're in trouble. This month now is billed as the dialogue between US and China, because there are many, many dialogues, right? Strategic, trade, finance, renminbi, and so forth. But that's not enough. You really should try to begin the process of understanding and mutual understanding. That's the reason why the dialogue between core values or ideal values may, on the surface, may turn out to be very idealistic, but I think necessary.
I turn to this side. Start. All right, ladies first.
Thank you. When you said that Said did more harm for Islam than good, because if anything, Said actually exposed the complicity between Western imperialism and Western Enlightenment, and it came to a point where many scholars in the Islamic world actually thought that Orientalism was in many ways a face-saving treatise on Islam, which it wasn't actually. He exposed what was actually the inadequacies of much, but not all, scholarship in Orientalism. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, I want to ask you a question now. This has got to do with Asian values. Again, isn't that, if I heard you correctly again, you equated, or rather you described Asian values as general, universal values, But I don't have to tell you that there's been a running debate on what Asian values are, and whether or not actually you might be valorizing what was seen specifically as Asian values a bit more than is necessary, because as your good friend Amartya Sen says himself, there's no need for the East to apologize about a poverty of ideas on universalism, on human values. But I think the specific debate on Asian values was a bit more limiting. I wonder what your views are, because China, with due respect, also used it to actually, in many ways, sanction some of the human rights issues that were rampant. Thank you.
On Confucian philosophy at Peking University in 1985, and I realized one thing, that is, the message is not what you delivered. The message is what that has been heard. And in this case, you heard me totally wrongly. I was very surprised. I thought I delivered a message that is understandable, but you.
I did say, unless I heard you wrong.
No. I think you heard it probably totally wrongly. Sai is one of my great heroes. I like him. I adore him. I assign Orientalism to all my classes to say this is an incredibly powerful critique of Western imperialism opposed to colonialism. So don't get me wrong, that's one. The other one is, again, I was so annoyed by the fact that Asian values often were used in the press and in the American academic community to undermine some of the great values, human values, universal values that become embodied in some Asian societies. So my position is that these are more than simply Asian values. These are universal values manifested in some Asian societies. Of course, you say responsibility. And immediately the question is, does it mean the responsibility of the people to be obedient? Well, that's a very misconception of the idea of responsibility. If you look at the Confucian text, responsibility meaning the responsibility of the elite. The more you're powerful, influential, and have access to information and ideas, the more you're obligated to be responsible. So responsibility is a value. And just imagine that if some of the great financial institutions, now every one of them getting into trouble, develop some sense of responsibility, the situation would have been very different. Amartya Sen, let me just mention one thing, sort of amusing one to end. His book called Argumentative India. And if I were to write something comparable, I would probably say Dialogical Chinese.
Yes, Ustad, maybe this is the last question.
I am very impressed with the topic, calling for a dialogical civilization. But at the same time, am I right to say that you are trying to shift from the class civilization into dialogical civilization? But my question here is, study civilization will take a long time because we have old civilization, we have middle age civilization, we have modern civilization. So I would like to suggest, instead of going directly to dialogical civilization, can we make a symposium of the civilization first, make everybody understand the civilization of old civilization, Islamic civilization, Chinese civilization, and then after that, we are calling for dialogical civilization. But for you, of course, you are a professor, you can go straight away to the dialogical civilization. But for me as a student in history, and for my students, if you are calling me or us to go to the dialectical civilization at once, I think will be more harm than good. Thank you.
Okay, I think I saw your hand. Last one.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for allowing me. My question is like observational. I don't know. Actually, when you look at the professor did mention that in order to have dialogical civilization, there should be mutual respect. But as it is now, I realize that the West, let me use the West again, this sort of hegemony and double standard which is happening until now, I don't think it will augur well for this sort of dialogue to continue. And also, they also lack knowledge of the other part of the world. If you look at what happened after September 11, the average Americans were attacking Sikh wearing the turban, mistaking them for Muslims. So what's the comment about this? Thank you very much.
And too much arrogance. And this, all kinds of misinformation. And so the world itself is not noted for dialogical interaction. It's noted for conflict and tension. So I think I totally agree with the professor. It would be very dangerous, abstract, and premature to simply to advocate what we have now is ready for a kind of dialogical civilization. So when we face the challenge there, we have to be critically aware of the current situation. And I think, I'm not naive. I'm not so naive as to fail to recognize the roadblocks and all kinds of negative factors in even considering the possibility of this approach as a way of cultivating a culture of peace. And I totally agree with you.
As the moderator, I reserve the last question. Professor Tu, after listening to you, when we talk about dialogue, I think somewhere it's embedded in your presentation because you talk about justice, sympathy, some of those values in your lecture. But for me, emotion and the emotive components of dialogue has to feature prominently for us to go somewhere. There is a purpose to the dialogue. And I think it is when the emotion is not aroused that you don't go anywhere. You don't have self-reflection, neither can you work within communities or even go up to the heaven level. I think the heavenly level is the one where the emotion is the strongest. Can you enlighten me a bit? I've been thinking, it disturbs me a lot to think that there might not be a strong emotion component to it.
You give me a lot of time, or give me a very short time to answer your question. Maybe just a little bit of time. And again, I think I wouldn't, normally I make a distinction between personal and private. We all know the distinction between private and public. For a long time, especially in the liberal tradition in America, the political process is the public domain, is the public space. And all these private feelings, such as religion, is called a matter of the heart. So the emotive elements, emotional, and so non-rational, not necessarily irrational elements are relegated to the background. Because that's not part of the political process, not part of the public space. I argue against that position. I think if you make a distinction between